No, 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 Batsquatch, Batsquatch. That little bloop sound I'm just gonna have to deal with, aren't I? Hey, nerd! Welcome to another episode of Little Lore, a show from where the streetlights end, where I tell you a little bit about whatever monster I think is cool this week. While this episode won't be super little, it is little lore content. So I'm calling it a little lore, but it'll be a bit longer than others, I think. We'll see how quickly I speak. Today, I've got a monster with a really cool origin story, who hails from my homeland of the Pacific Northwest. Before I get started though, I want to ask you to like this video to help support what I do, comment down below and let me know if you hate my stupid face, and subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more content about monsters, folklore, dark history, and all things spooky. Join me. In the spring of 1980, Washington State was the site of intense and pervasive thunder from beneath the earth. As the primordial blood of the earth churned beneath the surface, hot magma rose from below and shook the ground underfoot. A series of small explosions and lava flows continued to sound the drums of war in a small area of western Washington, centered around a mountain called Mount St. Helens. On May 18, 1980, these horrifying threats from beneath the earth culminated in a devastating volcanic eruption. As magma worked its way up to the shallow spaces below the mountain, it created immense pressure, leading to earthquakes and periods of time when steam was being vented out through the surface. As the steam and pressure built up and built up, a large bulge formed on the north slope, and a series of fractures and cracks began to spread through the ground. Another one of these earthquakes took place in the early morning of May 18th and broke the entire north face of the mountain off, creating the largest subaerial landslide in recorded history. This meant that the molten rock, with the gas and steam under the intense pressure which had built up over the previous couple of months, had nothing stopping it from just exploding upward into the sky. The volcano had erupted, and this eruption of Mount St. Helens is widely considered the most disastrous volcanic eruption in the history of the United States. The column rose 80,000 feet into the sky and dropped ash on 11 different states across the country. Mudslides formed by the intense heat melting massive glaciers on top of the mountain also rushed down to the lowlands, leaving destruction in their wake. The mudslides reached as far as 50 miles southwest of the mountain. The thermal energy released during the eruption was equal to 26 megatons of TNT. About 57 people lost their lives as a result of the volcanic eruption. Hundreds of square miles were obliterated, and Mount St. Helens was left with a massive crater on its north side. This was a dark day in the history of Washington State, and really, it lives on as a part of the history for the whole country because of how powerful the eruption was. Those who were nowhere near the blast know of its destructive power. Volcanoes are a curious topic. Not only are they fucking awesome from a geological and natural history perspective, but they have also got a certain level of supernatural or paranormal mystique. Um, aren't there like aliens in there, right? Some people believe that. Because they are so very, very old. These great mountains were formed eons ago, when the planet was still shifting its skin, and the magma that flows from them when they erupt has been churning at the core of the Earth since the planet was first taking shape. Many ideas exist about there being something beneath the surface of the Earth. Hollow Earth theories, for example, suggest that perhaps there are entire civilizations or other worlds that exist at the core of our planet, never tainted by mankind's foolish endeavors. Even disregarding those more fantastical ideas, one cannot deny that when a volcano erupts, and that material from deep beneath the earth, which has lain dormant for perhaps millions of years, it is possible that something very old and very forgotten could make its way back up with it. And this brings us to our monster this week. In the year 1994, about 14 years after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, a teenager named Brian Canfield was driving his truck through a forested area of Pierce County, Washington. Pierce County is a bit of a trek away from Skamania County, where Mount St. Helens is located, and is actually much closer to the large city of Seattle, right? Tacoma, Washington is in Pierce County, if that helps anyone get an idea of the area I'm referring to. Anyway, he's driving along, minding his own business, when suddenly his truck comes to a sudden stop, all on its own. I've seen this in the X-Files. It dies there in the middle of the road. According to Canfield's testimony, he stepped out of the vehicle to figure out exactly what had happened. The lights of the truck still pointed forward as he made his way to the hood to take a peek at the engine. Quite suddenly, he claimed, something very large swooped across his headlights. He stopped, frightened, as he looked around to figure out what the hell that was. At first, he thought it may have been a very large bird, but then a massive creature landed with a crash upon the hood of his truck. Brian Canfield described the creature as having glowing eyes, large protruding fangs, blue fur, and massive wings like a bat. Two different versions of his story relate that the color of the creature's eyes are different. One source says that he claimed that they were red, and another source states that Canfield described the eyes as being yellow. Regardless of the eye color, his story goes on to say that the monster stared him in the face for a short while, then suddenly jumped up off of the truck and flew away. As soon as the creature was out of sight, his truck started up again all on its own. At this point, Canfield, I'm sure with some extra weight in the back of his britches, hopped back into his truck and drove the fuck away. Like you do. A local newspaper called the News Tribune, out of Tacoma, Washington, interviewed Brian Canfield shortly after he spoke publicly about his experience. The interviewer stated that whether what the teenager said was, whether it was truly a monster or not, right? It was apparent that he truly believed his story to be real. Which is to say, Brian Canfield seemed to be telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, based on his understanding at the time. Whether his perception and memory were perfect is, of course, always up for debate here on this channel. His statement goes, and I quote him here, "It was standing there staring at me, like it was resting, like it didn't know what to think. I was scared. It raised the hair on me. I didn't feel threatened. I just felt out of place. It's looking right at me, like in a deep stare, like right through me. It's standing perfectly still. It stood for how long? A few minutes. Several minutes. Then its fingers twitched and its wings began to unfold. Those wings were as wide as the road. It turned its head and looked back at me and started flapping its wings. A few minutes later, the truck just started. I took off as fast as I could." Those are the words of teenager Brian Canfield in 1994. The reporter from the News Tribune who interviewed Canfield, C.R. Roberts, was the first one to call this monster Batsquatch. He came up with the name for it based on Brian's description of it as having wings and being huge. He imagined it basically looking like a blue-furred Bigfoot, but with bat wings, right? Being at home in the Pacific Northwest, just like Sasquatch, I'd say it's a pretty apt name for the beast. What do you think? Too derivative? Tell me in the comments down below. After Canfield reported his sighting and got some press from the local outlets and word of mouth, many other sightings were reported by people who had witnessed some variation of this terrifying winged beast. Most of these sightings took place in western Washington, in the same region as Pierce County, down to around the southern border, which it shared with Oregon. Washington still shares the southern border with Oregon. Just to be clear, that didn't change. However, some witnesses claim to have encountered the same beast much further away. I will tell you some of those sightings, those reports, if you will. First, a man named Butch Whitaker, a liquor store owner in western Washington, reported having encountered the creature, or a creature by the same description, as Batsquatch while flying his personal plane near Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is very near to Tacoma, for those who aren't familiar with the area. He claimed that as he was flying his private jet, or his private airplane, a massive creature with huge bat wings and blue fur flew alongside him for a short distance before veering off and disappearing out of sight. Another sighting was reported by a log truck driver who was making his rounds in northern Oregon in 1998. He described the monster as being about 15 feet tall, with purple eyes and small wings. So this one is different from our OG in a couple of ways, eye color and wing size, at least. In 2009, a group of hikers were exploring Mount Shasta in Northern California when, according to them, they witnessed a huge creature with massive leathery wings. They believed it to be the Batsquatch. Their stories, however, changed back and forth a few times, and eventually they landed on a description of the monster as being more like a flying fox bat, if you know what I mean, with the long snout. In June of 2011, someone who chooses to go by the name Phoenix Tiraz claimed to have been in the yard with his dog when he saw something massive in the sky above him. He quickly picked his dog up to keep it safe from whatever the fuck that might have been. He stated, and I quote, "I saw something in the sky. It had bat wings, blue fur, and had a face similar. Eyes glowing red. It was about 9 feet tall at least. After, I watched it just fly away." And then, in April of 2014, at Archbishop Habon High School in Akron, Ohio, a second period Spanish class all claimed to have seen a giant mass zip by the window of the classroom at an incredible speed. The whole class agreed that whatever it was, it seemed to be about 9 feet tall with a 20 to 30 foot wingspan. And there, we have all of the most detailed and or interesting reported sightings of the Batsquatch, or something like it which seems to fit the bill. They are all a little bit different, and some happen pretty far away from the earliest sighting by Brian Canfield, and that isn't unexpected with the cryptids like the ones that we talk about here. You may wonder, however, why I started out this story with a detailed narrative of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Well, I'll tell you why that's relevant. So, there are a few theories on who or what the Batsquatch is. The first is the classic one that we see with cryptids, and that it is simply a very rare species that has historically been very good at evading humans and avoiding detection. Perhaps it is believed that the Batsquatch, like many other cryptids, began coming into contact with humans more often when its habitat reached a certain level of destruction. The 1990s would make sense as a time when the forested areas of Washington state may have been getting smaller and smaller. Another theory about the Batsquatch is that it is among a certain subspecies of cryptids that all have a humanoid body with features of different flying animals. This would put it into the same category as the Mothman and the Jersey Devil. Some believe that they are all some related type of creature, but with distinct characteristics or a different secondary animal hybridity based on its natural habitat, right? So the natural environment that the creature lives in will dictate the secondary characteristics that it has, because they're like humanoid animal hybrids, right? And so it's human, and then the animal that it's a hybrid with will be suited to its habitat. Does that make sense? I hope so. Anyway, now, the most interesting of these theories, in my humble opinion, states that Batsquatch is a very ancient creature, that it was once a common species on Earth, perhaps millions of years ago, but due to some unknown geological or cosmic event, the whole species fell dormant and ended up buried deep beneath the surface of the Earth. Or perhaps they existed on the surface when the surface of the Earth was much hotter, and as it cooled, they burrowed down below so that they could remain in the molten heat of the Earth's core. But when Mount St. Helens erupted, and all of that hot magma from deep below was brought forth, perhaps it brought one, or maybe two, or more, of those ancient beasts back up with it. So, As you may have realized, when I read to you a pretty long list of sightings, though, there have been no shortage of reports from people who have claimed to have encountered our winged friend. But unfortunately, as you may have also noticed, almost none of them have much substance to them. Almost every report is simple and comes with little more than a description. And even the descriptions tend to be all over the place. The few things that they have in common are that there are wings and that the creature is very large. How large it is changes, what kinds of wings it has changes, the eye color changes, the face shape changes, etc. And there have been so many people who, like since the 1990s, who have said that they've seen this thing, right? But there has been no evidence at all. Many people claim to have taken photos, but as far as I can tell, none of them have ever been shared publicly. And I haven't been able to find anything but neat fan art on the internet. The most common thing that I found on the internet is the label for a beer that's named after Batsquatch from a local brewery in the Pacific Northwest. I think that's kind of neat. But like, even with Sasquatch, like with Bigfoot, we've seen footprints, interesting hair. We've had more in depth descriptions and stories of people's interactions and encounters with the Bigfoot. But that's not the case with Batsquatch. If nothing else, though, it's a cool story. And another spooky thing to look out for when you're in the woods of Western Washington, where I currently live. Or I guess, fucking Akron on Ohio, I guess, as well. Whatever. So, the vast number of winged cryptids that I've come across has led me to the conclusion that humans must have some weird subconscious paranoia about sky monsters, right? There's something inside of our brains, below the surface, somewhere, that tells us that there are big ass predators up there that are looking to swoop down and snatch us up. We think that's really freaky as a whole. So I wonder if it's an evolutionary layover from way back in the day, like prehistoric times when large predatory birds were a pain in our ass. That makes about as much sense as anything else. What do you think? Comment down below. Tell me I'm insane. So there's one more fun thing about Batsquatch, and thankfully this isn't getting super long. It suits as a little lore. I'll tell you this fun thing though. So there's an effort to set up Batsquatch monitoring stations. You heard me. The idea is that because the Batsquatch has been neglected and largely overlooked by the scientific and the cryptozoological, probably more so, community, there is a shameful lack of information and awareness of the creature. This could lead to dangerous encounters, misinformation, and ignorance. It is believed by most who have studied the Batsquatch that it is indeed native to Washington state, and therefore it would be reasonable to at first limit the monitoring stations to Washington and then expand the coverage to other areas if the data suggests it could be useful to do so. According to this site run by Batsquatch advocates, it seems, at storymaps.arcgis.com, it says, within Washington, it must be determined which factors are most influential for Batsquatch survival, and how these factors overlap into habitats most likely to sustain stable Batsquatch populations. So, according to this, it is hoped that we can treat Batsquatch like an endangered species and can protect and do the work for them to be able to flourish. This site suggests that the habitats they prefer are at higher elevations and that they are likely to make their homes around mountains. So, there you have it, nerd. That is the story of Batsquatch, a rather obscure cryptid from the Pacific Northwest. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed my story, comment down below to share any cryptid experiences or theories of your own, and subscribe to my channel for more spooky stuff like monsters, myths, and dark history. Join us over on Patreon for extra content, personal updates, and the chance to be a part of the conversation or even win something pretty that I make the next time I do a giveaway. That's all for now, I guess. Later, nerd. Wait, one more thing? one more thing. I knew it wasn't later nerd yet. I would like to give a shout out to the fantastic people who support me over on Patreon. I'm pretty passionate about researching these topics and sharing these videos with you all, so the support over there, whether it be financial or emotional, means a whole lot to me. A big slobbery thank you to Michael Matei, Andre Davos, C.Y. Magren, Christopher Coulson, Smoothie, Patrick Finnegan, McBabylegs, Walter Fate, and Dale. And of course, thank you to my free members as well. Like I said, the emotional support means just as much. It makes a huge difference just knowing that people like that I do what I do and want to see me do it. Alright, so there we go. Now that's all. Now, later nerd. Get out of here. You go back to the mountain. From whence you came. That's what I'm gonna do.